So what is the wisdom? What do we glean from Job? Well, I think one of the more obvious things to me, as you look at Job's prayer and his interaction, he's got several friends that are interacting with him, for those unfamiliar with the text. And they come, they do the best thing they could for him. And when they first arrive, they sit silently with him for 7 days. And then they open their mouth. And that ends up being a problem. So there's this dialogue back and forth between Job and his so-called friends. But what's intriguing to me is Job's lament, because he is complaining. He is lamenting. He is expressing his sorrow. And his lament is emotionally honest, and it's boldly accusatory. Listen to the language. Chapter 7 speaks to God. Will you never look away from me or let me alone, even for an instant? If I had sinned, what have I done to you, you who see everything we do? Why have you made me your target? Chapter 13, stop frightening me with your terrors. Chapter 10, what charges do you have against me? Does it please you to oppress me, to spurn the work of your hands? And then chapter 30, I cry out to you, God, but you don't answer. I stand up, but you merely look at me. You turn on me ruthlessly. With the might of your hands, you attack me. And this isn't just Job that speaks like this. I mean, this is bold. It's emotional. And that's just a sampling. You read through it, you'll see this over and over and over again. We read a portion of Psalm 88. I don't know if it struck you as odd, but when Nicole read it and then we sing the Gloria Patri right after that, it's kind of, whoa. But that's Psalm 88. It's accusatory. It's bold. It speaks directly to the pain and the agony. You have put me in the lowest pit, the psalmist charges. You, God, your wrath lies heavily on me. You overwhelm me with all your waves. You have taken away my closest friends. Yowza. But this isn't unique. Psalm 89, this long litany of how wonderful God is. And then the psalmist goes, what the heck? You're not fulfilling your covenant. Everything's falling apart. Psalm 43, numerous psalms like that. But the part of his lament that's interesting, and what differs for him versus the way I lament over losing stuff. I lament over my headaches, over my back, over, Job laments about his loss of his sense of God's presence. Of course, his counselors say, Job, listen, if you'll seek God earnestly, if you'll plead with the Almighty, if you're pure and upright, even now he'll rouse himself on your behalf and restore to you your prosperous state. They missed it. They think Job is anguishing over his lost stuff. But that's not where he's focused. 58 times Job speaks to God directly. His counselors never do. They speak about him a lot, but they never speak directly to God. He sits in the question. He anguishes over 34 chapters. In chapter 29, he says this, oh, for the days when I was in my prime, when God's intimate friendship blessed my house, when the Almighty was still with me. That's what he longs for. His lament was theocentric, God-directed, God-centered. It was all about his sense of loss of God. His lament, he laments God's silence. I cry out to you, God, but you do not answer. We've been there. God's refusal to act. God, you merely look at me. God's oppression. You turn on me ruthlessly. Why do you hide your face and consider me your enemy? So it's very God word. But the other part that's really intriguing is that there's this irrational hope that he has in the midst of all this. One of the most often quoted sections in the book of Job is in chapter 19, which we read this morning. He says this, I know that my Redeemer lives, And that in the end, he will stand on the earth. After my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I myself will see him with my own eyes. I and not another. How my heart yearns within me. His hope is hanging on seeing his God, on God appearing. You know, we read into this, certainly, the resurrection, our ultimate hope that we look toward. Job doesn't have that in mind. Typically, Old Testament writers didn't. But there was something that he knew, that he would see his God in the flesh, that God would come through. A hope that he saw dimly, a hope, therefore, with an answer, and an answer that we'll look at in just a second. In all of this, what's interesting is that ultimately Job's lament is this expression of deep trust. He trusts God enough to question God, to accuse God. He feels safe enough. You know, you've heard the phrase, it's not for us to question the ways of God. The book of Job shoots that one all to pieces, because that's exactly what he does. That's exactly what he does. And what does God think of all this questioning, these accusations? In chapter 42, we read, as God speaks to his friends, you have not spoken the truth about me as Job has. As Job has. The Tyndale Old Testament Commentary Series, the author of the book of Job, says that God welcomes moral judgment from man's side, even when that judgment is directed against God. Job did that. The psalmist do that.